All right, well, maybe just give it a few minutes to get people logged on, make sure we capture everybody, and then we'll get going.
Have we got very many more to come on, Sean?
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Deb.
I just wondered how many more have to come on.
Yeah, we're just gonna do a quick attendance check, I think, here, just to see if everyone's on the signed up.
Maybe what I can do, Sean, is just get started with the housekeeping items while we wait, and then we'll be sort of 5 minutes into it by then, and I think we can get going. We're recording as well. We're recording as well, so we can share the presentation. So just a quick few notes to everyone. Hi to those of you who I don't know. My name is Nicole Espnon. I'm Manager of Marketing and Communications with Speed Skating Canada. Thank you for joining us for our Return to Sport Town Hall today. I'll turn it over to Sean Holman, our Chief Sport Officer, in just a minute, but wanted to remind everyone, if you could please keep yourselves on mute throughout the presentation so that we can ensure everyone can hear Sean. If you have any questions, please feel free to enter them into the chat box or to save your questions to the end, and we'd love for you to unmute yourself and ask them at that time. We are recording the presentation today, so if you do need to leave early or you miss anything, we'll be sending out this recording so that you can refer back to as well. J'aimerais aussi dire que la présentation sera livrée seulement en anglais aujourd'hui, mais on a des fichiers en français et je serai disponible pour répondre aux questions en français aussi. Il y a aussi la Fédération provinciale FPVQ qui va avoir une session en français aussi demain pour celles qui sont intéressées. So before Sean gets started with our presentation today, I'll turn it over to Susan Ock, our CEO, to say a few words.
Hey everyone. It's a strange way to meet these days, but I'm quite used to this now. I'm sitting in my cooking hot space because it's very hot in Manitoba right now. I just want to thank everyone for getting on the call. Our intention here is to share some guidance only. We have no intention of telling municipalities or communities that we don't know your specific requirements from your municipality or, all the municipalities are very different. So we're not looking to dictate anything. We know the provinces are doing a great job in return to sport. We've seen many of the messages that have gone out now, and we really thank you for that. And so this is meant just to complement what you're already doing, and we hope that it can help in some way. We've had many requests to give some ideas and thoughts, and we've been given a lot of tools by sport task forces across the country, and we just hope this can help. So please feel free to reach out, obviously, if something is missing and you need something more at the end, but I will send this back over to Sean to present the town hall now to you. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Susan. So we'll get rolling on what the, I guess, objectives of the town hall are. Again, I guess what we're trying to get across to everyone today is presenting Speed Skating Canada's high performance plan. So give you guys a look into what the high performance program is doing. It's important to note that that's it's not something that we expect all the provinces and/or clubs to do. It gives you guys an opportunity to take a look at how high performance has handled this first rollout, and then maybe gives you guys some ideas as well of what you can do, working with your provinces as well as your own communities where you guys are training. So first, we're going to present our phase 1 training plan. One of the other main goals is to share some tools and resources. I know there's a lot out there that a lot of clubs and provinces have been developing right now. So it's really some resources and guidance for the PTSOs to then use with their clubs and within their own plans there in their communities. And then to discuss next steps for return to play or return to sport working group as well. We'll cover that at the end. And to circle back again, this is, and Susan mentioned this at the beginning, this is not a mandate or directive. This is simply taking some guidance documents to help you guys to navigate this in your own provinces and then with the provinces within your own clubs there. So it's some resources here that we're going to share today. And then from that, I'm sure there'll be more questions once the resources go out, but there's a lot out there. So hopefully this helps you guys with some specific information that might help you guide you guys. So we'll go to the next slide here, our high performance plan, return to training. First, we thought we'd start off with what's happened since March, and to just give some of you guys a snapshot. It's a little bit different in long and short. We'll start off with the long track right now, but just looking at March 11th when the pandemic was declared. March 13th was the date that SSC offices were closed, and that's when we started to initiate our self-isolation with our staff as well as our athletes. So luckily we were able to move pretty quick on that. And then the CSI, the Sports Center in Calgary, and the INS in Montreal closed shortly after that. And as many of you know and experienced, a lot of the cancellation of events at the end of the season, with the Olympic Oval shutting down, as well as other events across the country, and then the borders as well closing. Then we kind of fast forward to March 18th, where Canada initiated its lockdown, borders closed to non-essential travel on the 21st. And then into April, we started our high performance staff meetings, weekly meetings with long and short. There's a lot of, disadvantages with the current pandemic that's going along. One positive is, and I think a lot of people can maybe experience this as well and talk to that, but we had a lot of opportunities to connect online. I know with Susan and our 2 programs, long and short, to connect. So we started those. We've been continuing on with those. May 1st, On the Podium released a draft return to sport assessment tool. We took a look at that. We did share that on one of our calls as well as sport development to take a quick look at it. That's something that we can now distribute to everybody. So you guys will have that in your package after this meeting to take a look at, and it's a resource to use again. Now, going into May 4th, we had then Quebec as well, looked at their reopening as well, their phase 1. Alberta began their reopening, phase 1, May 14th, and then the CSI Calgary released their phase 1 as well, return to sport guidelines. On the Podium on May 22nd shared their release of the COVID-19 return to sport framework. That's another item that we'll talk a little bit about today, and then also distribute to you guys after the meeting today. And then for long track, YYC modified opening of phase 1 on May 25th. And on May 27th, we were able to release the phase 1 return to training protocol with our high performance program in long track. There was a, and I think we'll talk about this as well, is that every city and every province is different, and they have different openings and different restrictions, and that's something that is first and foremost that everyone needs to consider, and then looking at some of the other guidance documents. So on the long track side, I know in Quebec City we have some different rules as well there, and considerations that have to be part of the plan as well. So there are differences. It's not a simple rollout just by discipline as well. It certainly goes to the area that you operate in. On the short track side, so very similar there. We won't duplicate what happened there, but some of the big ones there are cancellation of the World Championships in short track on February 26th. Again, a lot of the things are similar with the sports centers closing, the meetings with high performance staff, and then with the return to sport documents as well from on the podium. So some differences there, probably more based on the World Championships and short track being closed there. Then we take a look at, and a lot of you have been following the news, but just looking at the cases here across the country. A couple of good news stories. As you can see, Canada doesn't have as many cases as maybe some of the other places across the country. However, we want to make sure that we don't let our guard down too much here. We talked about this from a high performance standpoint, which is it's a very niche group, obviously going after Olympic medals. Therefore, we have some specific recommendations for them. Then going into the risk, what's our current risk? So reviewing this, basically looking at the athlete and, here's you, and what does it mean if you were to contract COVID-19? What's the impact to you on your long-term health, your training, your season, and then also future performances? And then also just illustrating here the other people that are affected. So looking at, your coach and your integrated support team, your IST, your family, your friends, your teammates, and then there's your extended friends and family as well that can be impacted by that. So with our athletes on the high performance side, just trying to drive home that scope. Certainly as a high performance athlete, you get people that are very centered on performance and themselves, which they need to be. But we are very cognizant in trying to expand that social responsibility and that awareness around them. And then going into, I guess, what's the current risk? So there's some unknowns. Why are some people asymptomatic? Why others are symptomatic? Why do some people, have more severe symptoms than others? How does this affect their training for those that are asymptomatic? And then long-term health consequences. We don't know those right now. And then what are the long-term impacts on performance? So a lot of these are unknowns. Then, effectiveness of masks, potential risk, poor wearing habits, relaxing, what's going to happen when we relax the physical distancing rules, which is starting to happen right now. And then can you get COVID more than once? So I think that's something else that, we're still waiting on that information, and those are some of those unknowns. And then going into long and short track, we took a look at the current training volume as well. I think for a lot of athletes, at the high performance level, we tried to look at, calming some of the nerves and really looking at what's been done and what the gaps are. I'd encourage, the provinces to take a look at that as well. I think it's good to take a positive approach. I think a lot can be done and has been done, and you got to celebrate those and really look at what the gaps are. I don't think we want to say that, now that the restrictions are starting to loosen up, we've lost half our season and now we're going to be able to recover. I think that's a negative approach, and we'd encourage you to have more of a positive approach. And this is an example of, a simple example, but we had this in both long and short, was looking at some training volumes of some athletes and actually noticing that right now the athletes aren't behind. We certainly acknowledge that there's some gaps when you can't get on ice and those kind of things, but not everything is doom and gloom. And I think it's important for people to understand that the training can be done. It's modified, but it's not like you're not able to do anything. So Then going into our goal, basically Speed Skating Canada's goal is to protect the health of our athletes, staff, and general public while keeping in mind Olympic performance objectives. So again, it's a pared down thing to the provinces, but still have some high expectations and goals, obviously, at a provincial level. And the Speed Skating Canada protocol is built on, I guess, a couple things. First and foremost, it's looking at the provincial and federal guidelines, taking those into consideration, and also stressing, and this is something that we wanted to be clear with some of our athletes, was that a lot of the considerations are for the general public, not for high performance sport. It is a niche group that we're trying to target, and there's a little bit of a different message, and that goes into some of the guidelines that we created for high performance sport. This may be the same when you look at what you want to do in your province as well, what kind of considerations you want to put in place. Then from there, it's looking at own the podiums for Canada, some of our partners as well. Take some guidelines and best practices from other high performance sports and experts in those fields, looking at those. And then finally looking at, after we combine those two together, looking at what, from a Speed Skating Canada perspective, what we're comfortable with. I think the big thing here is we didn't want to, we wanted to avoid moving too fast without taking, necessary precautions. We would have to take some steps backwards. So we want to make sure that we're moving forward and not having to reset and take any steps backwards. And again, this presentation will be shared with you guys. There's some links and resources in here. So we're going to go over a few slides fairly quick, but you guys can take a look at those after the presentation. But our next thing that we looked at was what are some of the other sports doing? This is kind of interesting to look at as far as other professional sports and the way that they're moving and navigating this. We'll go to the next one, which is Major League Baseball. Was one that we looked at. I think one thing that's important here is that Major League Baseball is very different than speed skating. It's a professional sport. They have, although we have a lot to lose as far as training and Olympic medals goes, and we hold that up fairly high. Looking at a Major League Baseball team and what's at stake there, it's interesting to look at the rigor that they put into the documents. So they're 67-page document there. And then also looking at some of the process that they have to return to training. The nice thing to see here was that we were in line with a lot of the things that Major League Baseball was doing. Looking at an intake screening with physicians, regular testing. That's one thing that we can't do in our sport because we don't have the money to do that, but the daily testing that they're doing. And then looking at, spring training, staggering, the pitchers, the catchers, looking at, group size was a big one, obviously maintaining that social distancing, and then some of the other testing as well that went into the protocol. So Major League Baseball is one we looked at. Then we went into facility updates. Again, different regions are going to have different realities here. This is an example of in Calgary, the sports that are there had no access. They're looking at access very soon, but when we presented this at that point, they had no access. Phase 1 indoor training would begin after Phase 1 outdoor was approved and was up and running. University of Calgary still has no access. I know they're working very hard right now trying to get that back. Currently, there's no access there and no updates as well on icing yet. Then WinSport, no use of any facilities or spaces, indoor or outdoor. They're looking at treatment centers as well, there as opening. So to give you guys a sense, I know you're also dealing with openings and what that looks like for your fields as well as some of your medical stuff there. And then on the short track side, so just taking the Montreal example here, the INS, which is the Sports Center in Montreal, currently no access. Reopened gym, we still unknown on the date on that, and then as well as treatment. Again, things are moving fairly quickly, as they probably are in your provinces as well. with the differences in reopening and what that looks like. Maurice Richard, if a lot of you guys don't know, it's been converted into a homeless shelter due to the COVID-19. Date that the ice will be back in and converted to arena is unknown. Date of ice in is also unknown right now. Part of our plan B and where some events take place at Place Bell, it's currently converted into a COVID-19 testing facility, and we have no date yet on conversion back to an arena there either. So a lot of unknowns there in the high performance side. I think I think in your own communities as well, you can appreciate that. You might be ahead of Calgary and Montreal in your own cities, but certainly there will be different challenges across the country there. Then moving to ISU updates, a couple things here I think is important, and this is where we talk about the working group that's going to be struck, from a PTSO perspective to look at some of those different phase rollouts. But from the ISU, the latest communication we have is that they've released some deadlines for canceling events. So right now they put out there a date in August as far as canceling the first World Cup, and then 10 weeks before any subsequent event to look at whether there's a cancellation needed. So we're moving cautiously forward with our, obviously with our competitions. We're going to have to look at what we're doing domestically as well, but this is where we are with international competition, and obviously there's a cascade effect into development competitions from what's decided at that international level. Then return to group training. This is one thing that a lot of people will be dealing with, even in the workplace, is looking at, as things reopen, what's mandatory and what is not. One thing we looked at for our athletes and staff, and it'll be different depending on your province and club, how you want to deal with this, but as an example, we looked at athletes and staff. It's not mandatory to return to group training. Everyone's comfort level is different, acknowledging that, and that everyone's comfort level will be respected. Athletes and staff are recommended to return to group training when they feel comfortable. And then the SSC commitment to the high performances groups where coaches and staff will modify program should an athlete wish to train alone, so continue to train alone. And then also that there wouldn't be any consequences or ramifications of athletes who choose to continue to train alone at home. There's a high demand that we put on our athletes. I know that the provinces as well, you guys have standards for each of the groups, and I'd encourage you guys to take a look at what those are as you kind of roll this out. At the high performance side, it was, cardio remain the same and untouched there. Services provided will remain the same. That athletes will remain a member in good standing as well, and not be in breach of their athlete agreement. So those are some of the things we wanted to get across to the athletes. I know some provincial athletes may be asking similar kinds of questions. So again, it's something for you guys to take a look at and see how you want to deal with that in your own provinces there. Then we get to our outdoor training protocol. There's a different protocol for our two centers in Calgary and Montreal, and then we also have Quebec City as well that falls under their provincial guidelines and local guidelines as well. So there's a few subtle differences, but the main protocols here on the long track side, we looked at a stepped approach with step one is a screening, and then from there looking at, are you cleared and can you proceed to the next level? Step two, go to group training. What does that look like? There's daily checks as well, utilizing some of our online training monitoring tools. And then going through some of the precautionary measures as well. Again, you can take a closer look at this after the presentation, but I'm sure in your own provinces you'll be looking at, in your clubs, at a stepped process. And I think one thing to point out here again is that this is an example from a high performance standpoint, what the teams are doing. We have to acknowledge as well that at the high performance level, we have a team physician, a physiologist, full-time coaches. So the system is a lot more robust to have a process like this in place. the expectation, at the club can't be the same as at a national program level. So this is not, again, it's a guide. It's something to take a look at. It's to prompt some thought, but it's not something that would be expected that you would be able to operationalize. Then on the training guidelines, you'll see here, on the outdoor phase, maintaining physical distancing, marking your water bottles, those kind of things, wearing masks as well. So the difference here would be the athletes would wear masks to training. They would wear them for instructions after they're a safe distance away for the workout. And depending on the type of workout, if it's a high intensity workout, then the athletes can take off their masks. However, coaches are required to wear masks at all times and have the hand sanitizer and those kind of things in place. Do not share equipment. So I think that's a creative approach that all coaches are going to have to take and look at how they can achieve and how they can achieve their workouts without sharing equipment and what that looks like. And then looking at transportation as well. So trying to do individual transportation. From a Speed Skating Canada perspective, for phase 1, we're looking at 6 athletes and 2 coaches is the maximum per each training group. Again, there's different provincial guidelines, there's different federal guidance as well. This is stricter than many of the provinces. However, this is what Speed Skating Canada at the national program level has been advised to do. So that goes back to what the general public is doing and what these people that are trying to win Olympic medals are trying to do. So just trying to put a little bit heavier restriction in place. Again, the first step would be for everyone to follow your provincial guidelines is the first step. Then going into the example, this is the Montreal example for short track. A little bit different, but also, again, the same, a stepped approach with screening, and then a decision tree into group training again, to look at making sure that we're trying to keep people safe. And the other thing is make sure that it's trackable and traceable. Should someone contract COVID-19, can we trace it back and help lock groups down and protect the spread, both for internal groups, but then also just as part of our social responsibility. And this is the work in progress a little bit right now. I know in Quebec we're still waiting on some approvals, but we have this prepared right now, and we're looking at confirming the numbers of athletes and coaches as well for short track, and specifically looking at what the recommendations as well as guidelines are within Quebec. Then going to some resources. Again, you guys will have this slide deck after, but we provided this to the athletes, as far as resources go, how to properly use a mask, washing hands, the physical distancing piece, and then removal and use of gloves. So a couple of resources there that athletes can then click on and help get those good habits in place. Then we looked at, and this was, for our high performance athletes, a lot of talk out there about I'm a young, healthy person. I'm not really at risk. I don't see why I need to maybe have these kind of habits in place. So looking at this, this was something that was brought forward by our physiologists. They follow, some different doctors and physiologists within our system and online. I would say, we always want to be careful what we pull off Twitter. However, Dr. Skiba here that has posted this, he's a physician and exercise physiologist in Chicago. He's on the front lines. He also works as a physiologist in the sports medicine side as well. So it's someone that a lot of our professionals consult and follow some of his guidance. But this was one thing that he posted, and basically the gentleman here is a bodybuilder. He is a nurse, so he is in a high-risk area, but he contracted COVID-19, perfectly healthy individual. ICU, he was in there for 57 days. 6 weeks of that, he was on a ventilator. Now, in this one, you can see obviously he's lost a lot of muscle mass. And basically the take-home message for our athletes was we need to take this seriously and we need to follow the precautionary measures that are in place. Because, you know, as an athlete, can we afford to go in and into the ICU for 50 days? What would that do to performance? And we still don't know the long-term effects on the lungs as well. So, so that's something that we wanted to share with our athletes. And then looking at considerations going forward, you know, and this is probably a little bit more on the social side of it. And basically, Dr. Skiba looking at the erosion of empathy, I guess, in modern society right now. And he provides a story of, you know, a young person that contracted COVID-19. He's on a ventilator. Days later, his mother was admitted, and how the father is dealing with it. You know, and looking at, you know, he has to eventually go back to his, we'll go to the next slide, Nicole, but he eventually goes back to his job. Because he's got you know, his essential job to make sure that he can pay for, you know, for the services that are keeping his family alive. So the take-home message here was that, you know, that's none of that story is okay. And then again, looking at anyone that thinks, you know, a haircut or going to a bar is more important, needs to take a look at themselves. And I think for our athletes, we looked at sharing this with them because a lot of times they are very focused as well, just on their performance, which they need to be. However, we have to take a bigger look at society and our social responsibility as well. So we wanted to make sure that that message is clear for our high performance athletes in those recommendations. So moving forward, we looked at, you know, obviously it's easy to forget the severity of the situation as we head into month 3 of the pandemic. There's a lot of fatigue out there as well. Be it physical or mental. Canada has taken more precautions, and we've seen relatively low numbers compared to other countries, so that's a positive we can take out of this. And then looking at phase 1 reopening as well, you know, this balances public safety as well as getting businesses up and running. So we wanted to stress with everyone that this is an economic decision to get things up and running, right? So you know, when we look at our where we are as a sport, you know, we're not crucial to the economics of the country, right? So, you know, why is the mall open, but you know, the Olympic Oval's not open, right? They're not the same. So we wanted to make sure that we get that message across and appreciate the fact that we, you know, we're lucky to work in sport, whether it's our coaches or our athletes. You know, and but also respect, you know, what society is trying to do as far as opening up the economy. So rolling out our training groups, I guess, and this is a checklist. You guys will be developing your own, I'm sure, in your provinces or continuing to build. I know a lot of work has been done already. But looking at the athletes before their training sessions, you know, do they have hand sanitizer? Do they have masks? Edge 10 is a monitoring tool online. That's something the national team has. Is there something the coaches can have on site with paper and pen? Certainly, we can do that. And then coaches as well, looking at hand sanitizer and masks. In Calgary, they chose to do temperature checks. In Montreal, they didn't. So there's some subtle differences there in protocol, depending on what province we're in. But good thing is to see that there is a lot of alignment across a lot of the initiatives. However, recognizing that depending on the city you're in and the province you're in, there's going to be some differences, and that's okay. Then we get into, you know, we finished off with the high performance is what your social responsibility is, and looking at performances of our teams, and I think you'll see this as well in your provincial areas as well, is, you know, the goal here is to get to the Olympic Games. The goal is to win Olympic medals. We want to make sure that everybody gets there. All of our athletes, all of our staff get to the Olympics. Not only that, is we wanted to put measures in place to make sure that when celebrating those Olympic successes, that everyone's family is able to get there as well. So, you know, we're trying to protect ourselves, but we're also trying to protect the family outside as well. You know, and this is kind of uncharted territory we're in, right? You know, we're out there to minimize the level of risk as much as possible, but also acknowledge that you can't minimize it completely, right? There will always be a risk. There's always touch points there. So So that's what we kind of reviewed with the athletes to give you a perspective from a high performance standpoint. Again, these are examples and some things that you can take a look at when you look at your own individual situation. Now getting into some of the resources and tools out there, as I discussed at the beginning of the presentation. The first tool that you'll be able to look at is the COVID-19 risk assessment tool for sport. This was something that was developed by the COC, by Own the Podium. Sport Canada was involved as well. So quite a few partners. There was quite a extensive task force as well that was put together to develop this. So this is something that is multi-sport. It's it's got a high performance side to it, but the nice thing about this tool is you can look at your own individual situation from a club perspective as well. So this here is a tool. When I first looked at it, I guess one of the cautionary things with a tool like this is that you click a bunch of questionnaire, question and answer, and then it spits out the result. That tool cannot be used on its own. It needs to be used in conjunction with other assessment tools and mitigating strategies. So I encourage you, when you look at any sort of tools, that you don't take them on their own in a silo and implement them, that they're all guidance tools. But I think it does provoke some good discussion in what you're doing, whether it be outside activities, indoor, and what size groups you're getting together and what you're doing in those activities. So that's the first tool there, is that one. We'll also forward along, again, they released a framework, Return to High Performance Sport framework. This high performance sport framework also covers a little bit of the recommendations for clubs as well. So this is not exclusive to national teams. I think there's a lot of applicable stuff that both provinces and clubs can use. So it's a document there that you guys can take a look at. Again, use it as, some of the great things that you've already got in place. Continue to do those and look at how you can maybe put a few of these into your practice as well. Then there's another document. It's an Excel document. It's got a couple tabs on it. The first tab here is the risk assessment tool. Again, another look at a tool that you can use at the provincial level, at the club level as well, to assess the activities you're doing and then some of the mitigating strategies. So that's a tool to take a look at, and then then there's a risk mitigation checklist as well. These are very similar to the other risk assessment COVID tool, the first slide that I showed you. But I think a lot of the power is in the mitigating strategies. It's not necessarily about assessing high, medium, low risk, but it's about what you're going to do in those situations, specifically to those workouts. They could be running programs, imitation programs, and then what you're going to do when you go back indoors to a rink, to a gym, those kind of things. So some great information there to give some thought to how you guys are rolling out the details of your sessions. Then you get to the Return to Sport Working Group. Maybe at this point I'll turn it over to maybe Alicia that's online that can run us through how we want to approach this group here.
I think it might be Dave who's speaking to this.
Oh, sorry. Sorry about this, Alicia. Okay, go ahead, Dave. If you want to run us through maybe a little bit of the framework and where we're going to go with the working group.
Okay, thanks, Sean. Just really the working group is going to be a forum for us to share more than anything else. Again, as Sean has said a number of times, the situation in your province, in your city, and in a particular facility is probably going to be different. So we're going to have a Return to Sport working group with the idea that initially we'll look at evaluating our current tools and mitigation strategies for a return to on-ice training. And this is really just to provide some guidance for members and maybe sort of examine where we're probably going to have some challenges, and also how we're going to use those tools to decide, can we return to ice training, again, depending on the local health authority and what they are mandating, as well as what the individual facility. The other part, there's really just 2 parts for the working group. The other part is to assess our sport requirements for a return to competition. This is probably going to be way down the road, but we want to have a good look at what we need from a sport perspective to run a competition, but also then look at our risk assessment tools and mitigation strategies to see when that might be possible. So what sort of criteria we're going to have to meet in order to be able to run a competition, and what our criteria is to be able to run a competition. Like how many people can you have inside the building, for instance. So after this meeting, we'll be sending an email out to our PTSO presidents and administrators, and basically what we're looking for is a group of, I'm going to say the working group will be a minimum of 6 members, but we're looking for skills across the following matrix: some sport technical knowledge, either a coach or official with a background in program and or competition delivery, looking at competitions, someone who has a background in hosting and or meet management. Of course, we want to make sure we have representation from our PTSOs, either from board or committee members, or full or part-time paid staff, so from our sport partner. Also regional and proportional representation as well, and based on sort of the number of members you have within your PTSO, how many members that we'd like to have on the working group, and understanding that we need to have representation from areas that will have lots of members and other areas that are smaller clubs. And of course, we are in keeping with our policies of trying to have a gender balance on this working group. So if you have any questions, please, you can fire them my way or to Alicia regarding return to sport working group, and there'll be an email coming out after this meeting that will give you this document for you to review, and then you can please forward some potential names that they could be included in this sport working group. And that's all for me. I can turn it back to. The slide is there actually, so that's good. I'll turn it back to Sean.
Okay. So we went through things fairly quickly there. Again, you guys will get this slide deck as well as those resources that we reviewed. I guess I would just, I'll turn it over as well to Blair at the end here for a couple comments as well. But I would like to kind of circle back on the fact that every province, as well as every club and every, I guess, community is different. And with what we're trying to get up and running now, it's not a competition. So a COVID-19 return to sport is not a competition. It's something that we need to work together on. And we also need to respect one another's decisions as well. Everybody is going into this with positive intent, and everybody's going to be different. I think we need to support each other as a speed skating community to make sure that, we're sharing best practices, but we're also respecting each other's own individual situations. So I know that, I'd like to acknowledge a lot of great work that I've heard from some of the provinces that have been moving forward on this. It's a lot of work to adjust to this. It's very fast paced. It changes very quickly. So I'd like to acknowledge the great work that's been done right now. And then, if anyone would like to share back on some of the best practices, I think that working group is is a good opportunity to do that as we all try to work together to navigate this. So I'll maybe finish off on that. We will have some question and answer at the end here. We have some stuff in the chat that we can go through, but maybe before that, I'll just turn it over to Blair Carver, our president.
Merci, Sean. Bonjour à tous. I don't want to take up too much time. You're going to have lots of questions. I see some questions going back and forth in the chat. I guess what I wanted to emphasize that our goal here is to make sure that provinces, territories, and in turn, through those provinces and territories, the clubs across the country get as much information and feel as empowered as possible, because in each province, in each town, each city, you're going to have to deal with venues and facilities and governments and health authorities in terms of what can be done and when it can be done. And you do that best when you have information and you have tools like those that Sean is sharing in this presentation. And that's what's going to move you forward safely and in a reasonable fashion in the interest of the entire skating community. And if I could just touch on that for a minute, I've always believed that the community of speed skating is a very powerful thing that we have working with us. And I think it can help us in this difficult time, as whether it's in Moncton, New Brunswick, or Prince Albert, Saskatchewan, or Langley, BC. Every situation is different, but there are commonalities, similarities, and as a community, we can help each other get through that. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Sean to moderate questions. I know there's going to be a lot, and they're not going to end tonight. We've got weeks and weeks ahead of us, months, God forbid, I hope not years. Thanks.
Thanks, Blair. Before we dive into the questions, I guess what I would also, if there's, we can take questions in French and English as well. Nicole assist with some of the French questions as well. So feel free to type your question in your language of choice, and we'll look at answering that. I guess at this point we can probably take a look at, I'll start to run through some of the questions here. Todd Landon had one just regarding PTSOs in the discussion on financial impact of social distancing on ice. That's certainly been part of the conversation. I think many sports are looking at that right now. There is an impact to that. Whether a sport can be even done or not is part of the discussion as well. So that's certainly a discussion that has happened probably more from a sport perspective at the high performance level, but it's something that's quickly come up at the club levels as well, and acknowledging as well that again, the different provinces are in different spots, positions, same with different clubs, right? And this is going to be a challenge. So this has certainly been flagged from a Speed Skating Canada perspective, both from a high performance standpoint, it affects high performance if clubs aren't functioning and surviving and thriving. So there's that, and then there's the general growth of the sport and those numbers. So something certainly that is top of mind for us. I think it also goes into events as well. Whether we can have provincial competitions, what does that look like? What are the impacts there? And then some of the high performance impacts as well, international events and those selection events as well. So lots of things to consider for sure. Maybe I'll turn it over to Susan. I know she's been dealing a lot with a lot of our partners at the COC, even at the government level as well, bringing those forward and discussing those. So they're certainly top of mind. There's not a lot. I don't think that there's not a lot of answers to share at this point, but it's certainly being discussed. So maybe I'll turn it over to Susan for some quick words on that.
Sure. So we were inundated at the beginning with all kinds of questions and surveys and forms to fill out and things we wanted federally. And I think probably most of you would have seen a $72 million chunk of money that was earmarked for heritage and the arts. I think it was more actually, but 72 million was going to sport. Of that 72 million, about half of it is going to high performance sports, so national team high performance. So the NSOs on a cash flow question. So we had to fill out a cash flow questionnaire, what we thought our cash flow would end up at, or if we were losing anything cash flow wise. And the other half of that, while part of it went to athletes, athlete assistance, about 32 million, I think, was going to the provincial sports secretariat. So that means that provincial sport bodies, so your provincial sport body in your province or territory, would be filling out that same questionnaire that we did. And I would urge you to make sure your leadership is asking questions to the leadership of the provincial sport bodies, so that speed skating is top of mind with that leadership. Just to make sure that you get whatever piece can be gotten, I guess, or be given to you or to our sport. And there's another 5 million, I think, from the COC that is going to come specifically for return to sport. And there is a realization at the federal level that the return to sport is going to almost certainly happen at the community level with community clubs and recreation centers. So I think that there will be things put in place to try to mitigate some of the risks that community level has with securing arena ice time, for example, and worrying that you won't have enough members to pay for that ice time. So that'll be cash flow, a cash flow issue. So I would really, I guess my message is just to urge you to speak to your national or your provincial or territorial sport governing group. For Manitoba, it's Sport Manitoba. I'm not sure what it is in every other province, but they are the ones who will know the most, and make yourself top of mind at that provincial sport governing body. All right, that would be my answer on the finance.
Great, thanks, Susan. Yeah, of course, it's going to be, there'll be more questions that come up as time goes on here. Working through the questions, we have one about the types of masks that we're recommending the coaches to wear, as well as reasoning behind the gloves. So as far as looking at that question there, I guess a couple of things we'll do with the masks first is, for our athletes and staff, we've recommended a mask. We haven't got a clear direction on, should it be the N95? Should it be a surgical mask? Can you use, washable, reusable masks, those kind of things? We drew the line for the athletes that you need to wear a mask. We've also let them choose their own level as well. Now, with the mask, we're maintaining social distancing. It's a little bit easier with the outdoor stuff. It might be more complex once we go to indoor. But right now, the recommendation of the athletes is they're wearing a mask as almost a secondary precaution. They're still going to be doing social distancing, so it's an extra step. For our coaches, we are recommending that they wear the surgical masks and any sort of staff. So reason behind that is that we have coaches that have increased points. So whether they're working with different strength and conditioning trainers and those kind of things as well, because they're at a higher level of touch point, we wanted to provide that more directive kind of level of security, I guess. But as far as wearing masks, talking to the medical community, you don't get a definitive answer. So we've chosen a level there to operate at right now. Should that change, and new information come available, we'll certainly adjust that. But that's where we currently are with the outdoor training. Regarding the gloves, that's a difference as well between what the group in Montreal is doing in Calgary. The Calgary group and the CSI there has recommended wearing gloves, and that's just for touching. Touching some of the thermometer checks and those kind of things, and then the coaches would take and dispose of the gloves there. So Again, probably the biggest thing is to, and you've heard this as well, going back to just simply the hand washing is the biggest one, and then also the hand sanitizing. So the gloves were just another, I guess, little detail into some of the operating procedure there. Again, there's different information on whether you should wear gloves or not. If you wear gloves and touch everything and then continue to touch your face, they're not preventative. So you have to use them correctly. But there's another question as well about if there's any restrictions or requirements specifically from Speed Skating Canada that the PTS and clubs have to follow. So there's nothing that's mandated from Speed Skating Canada to the PTSOs. Again, this is guidance for the provinces and territories to use for themselves and for their clubs. So there's no restrictions right now, and there's no mandate or rules that Speed Skating Canada has put out that all PTSO members have to follow. It's going down to NWT. As indicated, there's will be indoor, no ice sports until a vaccine is transmitted. This will be greater and cold. Okay. As far as I guess this question here, so that's a great update on NWT. Again, we're going to see differences amongst provinces and territories with what's going to happen, if they're going to reopen, when they're going to reopen, and what kind of the regulations are on those facilities opening up. We haven't heard in terms of arenas opening. I mean, I shared today a little bit about the Maurice Richard and the Olympic Oval. I think we're still waiting on, hearing from different provinces and clubs what that looks like, but for sure it will be different in every area, and potentially differences in the cities, depending on where they're at. I know in Calgary we had a staggered opening as well, where Calgary and Brooks, those two specific cities, were 2 weeks or a week behind some of the other cities in Alberta. So that would be something to keep an eye on. I think with that working group, it's good to keep a finger on the pulse with some of the challenges that are going across our organization. So I'd encourage you to share that with the working group, where you guys operate. So.
Sean, if I can just add, one of the questions I think was, or was that was the one that was related to indoor ice facilities, right? Yeah. Hockey Canada has reached out to us nationally to see if we can start a working group. I mean, I think most of you know that Hockey Canada has restricted any hockey to go back unless everyone goes back. I think that was their announcement. I'm not sure if that's changed yet, but they've invited curling, ringette, SSC, and Skate Canada to join them in a working group. So we will be starting that conversation with them. They've only come up with a table of contents so far, hockey, but we just don't have the group organized. It's a really big undertaking to have a group like that organized. So just to let you know that there may be more that comes out of just ice rinks. We just don't know yet enough. So just to add to that. Thanks.
Thanks, Susan. I guess a couple of things here in the chat. Great news from the Quebec government just regarding, a documentation on some of the funding and special support. I think that goes back to Susan's point of encouraging each of you to stick close to your provincial governments to look at new things that are coming out. And those are some of the things that can help with some of those challenges that your province or your clubs are certainly going to face. So, and capitalizing on any sort of support there. Additionally, as well, Robert put in a link. I know FPDQ has been working very hard on their return to sport plan. The link is in there as well. That's another great resource for you guys as provinces and clubs to take a look at. Lots of great information out there, so encourage you guys to take a look at that as well. I know FPDQ will also be hosting a meeting with their clubs as well in their province, as I think a lot of the other provinces will be doing as well with their clubs. So I encourage you guys to keep a line of open communication with your clubs. I think it's super important. I think there's a lot of people out there looking for information, and there's a lot of information to try to sift through as well. So any sort of direction that you can help with, I think they would most likely definitely appreciate that. Going down the list here, I see Carrie, I just see a comment there just about wondering if others have heard anything this extreme. I think that's related back to your question about no ice sports, I believe, but that's what I'm assuming there. Yes, okay. Yeah, I think that's probably where Susan mentioned Hockey Canada, and I know some sports have just said, we're not all back until everybody's back and those kind of things. So I think you'll see that as, I think dealing with outdoor training is one thing, but I think when we look at indoors and what that looks like, I think that's another animal to kind of deal with there. So we'll wait to see there, but again, I'd encourage you guys to go back to the working group. Any sort of check. Then going to Todd's question here regarding guidelines for coaches offering online physical training regarding insurance coverage for speed skating activities. I guess a couple things on the online training. I think one thing that's top of mind and has gone around the sport community as well as the safe sport aspect, and that the rule of two as well. Something that is top of mind for a lot of high performance sports with adhering to that safe sport kind of guidelines. It is different online. Whether a coach is texting an athlete one-on-one, how do you conduct online meetings as well? So those things are things that we need to keep in mind. I know that Dave had sent along, Dave Morrison had forwarded along some information that the Coaching Association of Canada sent along as well. So I'd encourage you guys to take a look at that information that was sent out and certainly share that with your clubs as well, because I think it's sometimes something that we don't think about, but something that as we increase our activities online, there are risks with that. And we want to make sure that we're protecting our athletes, but we're also protecting our coaches as well. And then as far as regarding insurance coverage for speed skating activities, I know insurance has been something that's come up in a number of conversations. I think, that's something that even the general population and community is looking at. What does that look like for travel? When we're advising people, without definitive information regarding masks, how far do we then mandate certain things, right? And what kind of liabilities do we take on? So I think that that's something, certainly from a national sport organization perspective, we need to keep in mind. I think it's something at the provincial level that I'd encourage everyone to take a look at, and that'll help navigate, how you guide your clubs as well. So I don't have a lot of guidance on that. I just have more of a, not a cautionary tale, but I think just I would prompt you guys to look into that and look at the different aspects that are involved with insurance. And with Quebec just starting ice sports working group right now. So yeah, I would encourage you guys to look within your own provinces to see what kind of working groups are being struck. It's always good to have some representation from our sports in each of those provinces and each of those working groups as well. So if you could try to get on those working groups, I think it's great. It certainly keeps our foot in the door as speed skating in the communities that we operate. Some great updates here in the chat. Thanks for putting those in. Sorry, just reading through the comments. A lot of these great sharing, so thanks for doing that. think with Chris's comment on the insurance, it's good to get some perspective, from BC as well, how they're working with their insurance broker and those conversations there. All right. So some great comments there in the chat. I guess I'll open it up one more time for any additional questions. If anyone has any other questions, we'll open it up for that. If not, that's our first town hall to kind of share a bit of information and resources with you guys. And, we hope that it's helpful for you to work through your plans and your provinces, and then as you guys work with your clubs. So, if there's anything else, I'll maybe turn it over and see if Susan or Nicole have any final comments as well.
No, I'm good. I wish everyone the best of luck and enjoyable summer. Hopefully we'll be able to get closer and closer to people this summer, while staying 6 feet apart, but outside it's a little safer. So, all right, have a great summer, everyone. And some of you I will see in a couple weeks on the AGM. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.